Some songs are sung not for stadiums, but for souls that need healing. When Ariana Grande walked onto the Tonight Show stage with that ethereal presence and vulnerable strength that had made her music a lifeline for millions, nobody expected her to reveal the most heartbreaking chapter of her guilt and redemption journey. Jimmy Fallon had planned a celebratory interview about Ariana's latest album. The audience was ready for the powerhouse vocals and inspiring resilience that always came with an Ariana Grande appearance. But what Ariana was about to confess would silence Studio 6B and prove that sometimes the most important performances happen not in sold-out arenas, but in quiet rooms where traumatized children learn that healing is possible. The cameras were rolling, the audience already mesmerized by Ariana's magnetic presence, and then she spoke 14 words that changed everything. I sing for kids with PTSD because I caused their trauma that night in Manchester. What came next wasn't just television, it was a revelation about responsibility, survivor's guilt, and the sacred mission of transforming the darkest moment of your career into a source of healing for innocent souls. Ariana Grande had always been known for her powerhouse vocals and fierce advocacy for her fans. The artist who turned personal struggles into anthems of empowerment, who used her platform to champion mental health awareness. But what audiences didn't know was that Ariana's understanding of trauma had been forged in the most horrific way possible, and that the guilt she carried from the Manchester Arena bombing had awakened a calling to ensure that the children whose lives were destroyed that night would not be abandoned to suffer in silence. The Healing Harmonies concerts had begun 6 years earlier during the aftermath of the Manchester Arena bombing, when Ariana was struggling with survivor's guilt, so severe that she questioned whether she could ever perform again. 22 people had died, and hundreds more were injured when a suicide bomber detonated an explosive device as fans were leaving Ariana's concert. Among the victims and survivors were dozens of children who had come to experience joy and left with trauma that would haunt them for years. The Manchester bombing wasn't just an attack on my concert, Ariana later explained. It was an attack on childhood innocence, on kids who just wanted to sing along to songs they loved. Those children were there because of me, and their trauma became my responsibility. Post-traumatic stress disorder had affected many of the young Manchester survivors, but their trauma was uniquely complicated because it was directly connected to Ariana's music. Children who had once found joy in her songs now experienced panic attacks when they heard her voice, creating a devastating irony where the art that had brought them happiness became a trigger for terror. Kids who had been at my concert were having panic attacks when they heard my voice on the radio, Ariana remembered with pain. Children who used to sing my songs were now too afraid to listen to music at all. Parents wrote to tell me that their children associated my voice with the most terrifying night of their lives. The guilt Ariana carried was multi-layered and consuming. Not only had innocent people died at her concert, but her own voice had become a source of trauma for the children who had loved her most. I realized that my voice, which I had always thought of as a gift that could heal people, had become associated with terror for these kids, Ariana said. The very thing I was most proud of was now causing pain for children who had been hurt because they came to see me. Working with trauma therapists, Ariana had developed an approach that used music therapy to help Manchester survivors reclaim their relationship with her voice. The sessions were designed to gradually reintroduce them to Ariana's music in a controlled, supportive environment where their trauma could be processed. These aren't regular concerts, Ariana emphasized. They're trauma therapy sessions that use music as medicine. We start with instrumental versions, then add humming, then soft vocals, gradually building tolerance while processing feelings about that night. Over 6 years, Ariana's program had reached 84 children affected by Manchester. Each session was conducted with trauma therapists present, specifically designed to help participants reclaim their relationship with music while processing their experiences. I worked with this boy named James who had severe PTSD. Ariana remembered with emotion. He told his mom he wished he'd never loved music because loving music put him in danger. Through our sessions, James learned that survival didn't require carrying guilt forever. The breakthrough had come when James was able to express his anger and fear directly to Ariana while she performed acoustic versions of songs he had once loved. The session allowed James to separate his love of music from his trauma about the bombing. James told me he felt guilty for surviving when other kids died, guilty for still loving my music when it reminded him of that night. Ariana said through tears. He learned that healing didn't mean forgetting the victims. The approach worked because it acknowledged the specific complexity of trauma connected to something survivors had previously loved, allowing them to reclaim positive associations while processing negative experiences. There was this girl named Sophie who had been at the concert with her older sister who died in the bombing, Ariana shared with sadness. Sophie had stopped speaking entirely after Manchester. Her parents thought music might help her find her voice again. Through carefully structured musical interactions, Sophie had gradually been able to express her grief while reclaiming her love of singing. Sophie's breakthrough came when she sang Imagine with me, something neutral we could share without triggering trauma memories, Ariana explained. When Sophie sang for the first time since Manchester, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. The most profound transformations happened when survivors realized they could reclaim parts of themselves that existed before the bombing while honoring their experience of surviving something terrible. Sophie is now 15 and sings in her school choir, Ariana said with pride. She still carries grief for her sister, but she's learned that loving music doesn't mean forgetting what happened. She can hold both trauma and joy at the same time. Several participants who completed the program had gone on to pursue music themselves, becoming advocates for trauma survivors and using their abilities to help other children process difficult experiences. Tonight's appearance was supposed to focus on Ariana's latest album, exploring themes of healing and growth. Jimmy had planned to discuss her artistic evolution and the inspiring energy that made her such a powerful voice for her generation. The interview had started with Ariana's characteristic grace. She had shared insights about her new music, discussed her approach to vulnerability in art, and charmed the audience with genuine humility, despite massive success. But when Jimmy asked about how Ariana had transformed trauma into healing for others, something shifted in her expression. You know, Jimmy, Ariana said, her voice taking on unusual weight, when people die at your concert, when children are traumatized because they loved your music, you learn that your voice carries responsibility beyond entertainment. The audience grew quiet, sensing Ariana was moving into more serious territory. Are you talking about Manchester? Jimmy asked softly. Ariana was quiet for a moment, her radiant energy replaced by profound vulnerability. I am, and about what happened after, when I realized my voice had become a trauma source for surviving children, and how I had to transform that back into healing. The studio focused completely on Ariana's words, shifting from entertainment to something much more meaningful. How did you handle learning your music had become difficult for survivors? Jimmy asked with compassion. Ariana's eyes filled with tears. It destroyed me. These were kids who loved my music, who came to feel joy, and my voice became connected to their worst trauma. The audience was silent, witnessing Ariana's raw guilt and responsibility. Jimmy, can I tell you about something that's become the most important work of my career? Ariana asked, her voice growing stronger, despite tears. Please, Jimmy replied, understanding something profound was being shared. Ariana took a deep breath and spoke to the camera. For 6 years, I've been doing therapeutic concerts for Manchester bombing survivors, 84 kids with PTSD, helping them reclaim their relationship with music and my voice. Jimmy's expression changed completely. You're doing music therapy with Manchester survivors? I'm taking responsibility for children traumatized at my concert, Ariana replied with conviction. My voice became their trigger, and I had to transform it from trauma source back to healing source. Tears streamed down Jimmy's face. Can you tell us about one child? Emily was 11 when she survived, Ariana said tenderly. She used to sing my songs daily, but after bombing, my voice triggered panic attacks. Through therapeutic sessions, Emily processed trauma while reclaiming music love. What happened to Emily? Jimmy asked through tears. Emily's now 17, studying music therapy, Ariana said with relief. She wants to help other trauma survivors reclaim what they loved before trauma. She learned healing means carrying both pain and joy. The audience was openly emotional, witnessing Ariana's private work healing children whose trauma connected to her music. How has this changed your understanding of artist responsibility? Jimmy asked. It taught me that when your voice reaches people, you're responsible for its effects, especially on children, Ariana replied with wisdom. These survivors taught me true healing happens when you face unintended pain and transform it into love. The segment concluded with sustained applause lasting over 6 minutes, recognition of true accountability, witnessing someone taking responsibility for trauma and transforming it into healing. Ariana's revelation became one of the most shared Tonight Show segments, inspiring conversations about trauma recovery, public figure responsibility, and music's power to heal even the deepest wounds. Most importantly, Ariana's disclosure showed that sometimes the most courageous thing an artist can do is take responsibility for unintended harm and transform their voice from trauma source into healing instrument for the most vulnerable souls.